So let's get going. We're going to do 4 things. We're going to try to at least discuss 4 things. One, we're going to get, I hope you have an understanding of what a 501c3 organization is. The question is, so you want to have a 501c3 organization, why? Think about that, because I'm going to ask you to give me a couple of reasons why. We're going to talk about understanding what a 501c3 organization is. We're going to look at some of the key steps in establishing a 501c3. And then we're going to actually look at the form IRS 1023, which is the form that has to be completed to be a 501c3 organization. We're going to walk through that form. We're going to demystify that form. And then we're going to talk about some requirements in terms of operating a 501c3. So why does anybody here want a 501c3 organization? Anybody? Just raise your hand, by the way. Yes.
We want to access funds.
So you think it'll help you access funds? Anybody else?
We want to keep Uncle Sam off our back.
You want to keep, and how will that keep them off your back?
Well, we can give a tax break to people who donate.
Okay.
They can make their donation tax free. That's one way.
Mm-hmm. Question is if having it will keep them off your back. That's a good question. The question is if having it will keep Uncle Sam off your back. But that's, I'm glad you mentioned it. Any other reasons? I want to have a 501c3 because
we want to set up a 501c3 because we want to be able to take the proceeds of what we do in terms of economic development and continue to reuse that for the redevelopment of the community, as opposed to necessarily patting people's pockets or, especially in poor communities, but to be able to continue to redevelop.
Okay. All right. Why?
We want to operate with Bob and Prosper legally and be effective legally in really moving the mission.
So you're saying you can't operate legally now?
On page C, you don't have all the access to a lot of things without the 501c3.
So there are certain things that you believe that the 501c3 status is going to give you access
To be able
to
to
certain
open
things.
doors.
Okay. All right. Anybody else saying this is why I want it? I mean, you're here for a reason, so you have to have a reason
Legitimacy.
to legitimize what?
Legitimize your organization so it seems more professional to the others around.
So you're saying getting a 501c3 will give you more professionalism?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Why 501c? Because really, for me, it gives access to other people, whereas individual or group of people, we don't have that access, but through a 501c3 organization, we're able to raise funds, and then you use the funds to benefit others. I do work with youth.
Okay. So you hope that it's going to give you access that you don't have now.
Right, that it allow other people to have opportunities to do things they wouldn't have hands probably to do.
Okay. You were going to say that?
In addition to obtaining government grants, I know that there are other organizations that you can partner with to make resources available to you that, are specially designed for the 501(c)(3)s.
So access to other resources.
Other resources
Okay.
that you normally wouldn't have access to.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I think too about accountability and transparency, being able to say to people with whom we're speaking about our organization, you can look at our tax records, you can see that we're above board, we're not hiding anything, we're not patting people's pockets, and we're willing to submit to the government authorities.
Okay, so you believe it'll give you access, accountability, and transparency. Okay, yes.
Well, we don't want to be a financial burden on the church itself. And there are a lot of cases where organizations don't typically want to contribute to a church per se.
Okay, before we flip on, anybody want to add?
I just want to add tax breaks.
Tax breaks. What kind of tax break?
Well, I mean, the 501c3s don't have to pay taxes on income and things of that nature, as long as it's reused. So,
Income and things of that nature?
well, income, primarily income and things like that.
No. I mean, words are really important.
Yes.
That they don't have to pay taxes on income.
Income, kind donations, necessarily sales tax, services provided.
Sales tax?
Well, sales tax is actually a separate thing. That's by the state, so that's got to be done separately. But you need a 501c3 to get the sales tax exemption in the state of Pennsylvania. So, tax breaks.
Tax breaks. Okay. Interesting. Okay, last person. Yes, did you say something?
I wanted to say something.
Okay, I'll let you. Yes.
A 501c3 lets you take your passion for whatever cause that you're working for and to put it into an organized entity that you can have actual, say, fun with. And also, it makes it financially, from a financial standpoint, where you see the money's coming in is for that program or services that you're going to perform. And also, like he said, in terms of taxes, and it's just not like a for-profit business, because I have both, and I can see the differences and love the non-profit business and dread the for-profit, the quarterly taxes, the yearly taxes, the wage taxes, all those taxes.
Okay. Are you having fun with the Leadership Foundation yet, Dr. Meade?
Yes.
So maybe you can have fun with 501c3.
Yes.
By the way,
I love it.
Every tax that you mentioned does not mean that you wouldn't pay them if you're a 501c3.
Pay wage taxes.
Okay. All those wage taxes don't get waived. We'll talk about it. Okay, last comment. Then we're gonna
I was just going to say, for the eyes of the public, there's something about having a 501c3 that says you are legal and you are above board, and I don't mind working with you.
Eyes of the public. Yeah, let's take. We'll talk about the difference between a 501c3 in terms of what the public can see and public access information. Okay, good comments here. We talked about access, professionalism, get government off your back, accounting, transparency, reduce financial burdens, tax break, take your passion, have fun with it, take the eyes of the public off you, or actually open the eyes of the public on you. Some of those things are somewhat accurate, but what we're going to do today is really understand a lot more clearly what, in fact, the 501c3 is and what, in fact, it can help you do a little differently. So what is a 501c3 organization? What is it? Give me anyone, give me a couple words, a couple phrases. Now, I know what you want to do with it, so what is it?
It is an organization that's recognized by the IRS as having tax exemption.
An organization recognized by the IRS as having tax exemption. Anyone want to add to that? Tax exemption?
It's also organizations allowed to raise funds through solicitations, that might be through donations and stuff like that to further their cause.
Okay. All right, let's talk about tax exemption. What kind of tax exemption? The IRS has a lot of tax. What kind of tax exemption is the 501c3 exempt from?
Income tax. So for-profits have to pay income taxes on the income.
Tax.
Yes.
Exemption from income tax. Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment? Were you getting ready to say something, Sam?
Well, just two words. It's a nonprofit
Ah,
organization.
Right, so it's no
And federal income tax.
Nonprofit and federal income tax. Non-profit. Does that mean that you can't make a profit?
No.
What does it mean?
I mean, if you do, you don't have to pay taxes on that money you make a profit off of.
Really?
No, because the money's got to go back into the business.
Right,
It's
has to
got to
go
go
back
back into the
into
business.
the-
It's got to be recycled.
Okay, that's an interesting question, and we're going to define that more as we go on. But the answer is no, you can make a profit. As a matter of fact, if you don't make some sort of profit or don't have some sort of additional money coming in, how are you going to exist from the day? But it does not mean you can't make a profit. The question is, how much profit
gets it and what you do with it. How much, there is a question about how much, what you do with it, and who gets it. Those are three issues. All right, so let's look at it. A non-for-profit is a state-chartered organization. It's a state-chartered, not-for-profit organization. State charter is the birthing of the organization. When you establish your organization, you were, and like a person, you were born in a particular state. When you birth your organization, you have to notify the state that we are starting this organization, and we are starting it as a not-for-profit organization. That's the first thing you have to do. Secondly, is recognized by the IRS as exempt from federal income tax as stated in the IRS tax code in section 501c3. That's why it's called a 501c3. Do you understand that little thing right there? It's tax exempt from income tax as stated in this particular section. Okay? There are more than one kinds of tax exempt organization. We're going to just talk about it. But this particular kind has certain restrictions. And that's one of the things we're going to look at. It may be, not necessarily, it may be taxed from state income tax or state sales tax. It depends. And that's a separate application with the state. And it's not the same. I was with a 501c3 organization in Pittsburgh. We were a community development corporation. We did not get we were not exempt from state sales tax, but we were exempt from federal income tax based on what we were doing. Okay, so any questions so far? By the way, everything you see here is in your notebook. All right? Here's what I want you to do. As we go along, I want you to write down things that you did not know about a 501c3. And at the end, I want to have all of us share. Okay, I didn't know this. So somewhere in your notes, just make notes. Hey, I didn't know that. Okay? Because we want to share that later on. All right. So let's look at what it is not. Now we have an idea. It is not a meal ticket to federal money. It is not. It is not the key to foundation dollars, although most foundations will not give you dollars unless you have one. Give you dollars as an organization unless you are state tax exempt. Okay? And they can't, by virtue of their charter, which is a 501c. Anybody know the initial?
4.
4. See, 4. It's not always easy to get, although by the time we get through here, you should have a good understanding, and some of you may be able to do it yourself. I don't recommend it because there are some slight nuances, particularly as you go along, that you might want to deal with it. Yes?
Could you go back to that last statement for a minute? A 501c4 is a foundation that can only give to 501c3s?
No, I'm saying that foundations can only give, not a foundations can only give. We'll actually discuss a little bit more about what 501c4, but as foundations, they can only give and be taxed and have their money not be taxed if they give to certain kinds of organizations.
They give it to 501c3s.
And those organizations normally need to be, one of those kinds of organizations are 501c3. They can give to other 501 organizations. They can give to others, but there is a limitation.
This applies to mine. I'm here wearing 2 hats. I'm here for the union, and I'm here for which we're trying to start up a bottled water company and give 100% of the profits to people who are to other organizations who are digging wells and rain catch systems and filtration systems in Japan, Haiti, wherever. And so at some point, we're going to be a 501c3. We're already in the application process. But at some point, we're going to give to other organizations as well. And so I have questions in my head about, do we need to be a 501c4 as well?
You might, and again, that's, that question just needs to require a little bit more looking at, because you have to figure out how much money you're gonna get to these organizations, because most foundations, when they give to another organization, must give to another tax exempt organization.
Yeah, they will be.
I said tax exempt, I didn't say 501c3.
Right, they will be.
Okay, so that's the key. Another tax exempt organization. I'm going to show you some of the other kinds of tax exempt organizations, like hospitals, schools.
Right.
They are not 501c3, although they could, but most of them are under a different IRS tax code.
Is it possible to be a 501c3 and a 501c4 at the same time?
No.
You got to be one or the other.
One or the other. Okay. And securing it isn't the end. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those different kinds actually in a few seconds. All right. Let's look at some reasons that I have for becoming a 501c3. One, a firewall for your church's assets. When you establish a 501c3, you are establishing a separate entity. That separate entity is like a separate person. Activity that happened in that entity is the liability within that entity is limited to that entity. For example, let's say you had daycare, and the daycare, you had a separate organization. Well, let's say you didn't have a separate organization, and something happened to one of the children. And you were simply doing it as a part of your church. You were simply doing good. Your church and all its assets are now at risk for suit or taking, because it is within that structure. If in fact you establish a separate organization that had the daycare and something happened, and I'm going to say, normally, what happened would be limited to the assets and the liability of that institution. However, if it happened to be operating within the church, within the building of the church, then there are some other issues, okay? But what you have done is at least provided the beginning of a wall of protection around that act. Those activities. So it can provide a firewall for the church's assets. It's necessary for most foundations and corporate grants by virtue of the law. It is necessary for most foundations. Most foundations will not give you money unless you are a tax-exempt organization. Notice I did not say a 501c3. I said a tax-exempt organization. By law, that's part of their restriction. And it makes you eligible for many public grants and contracts. If you go, and if you read the Federal Journal, what's the Federal Journal? What are you talking, Sam? Federal Register. Right, thank you. Many grants and many contracts that the government has are limited to 501c3 organizations. Not all of them, but many. So it makes you eligible. So these are some of the reasons that you might want to consider getting a 501c3 organization. Anybody have a question so far? Okay, so now let's talk about, we've talked about this already. There are lots of tax-exempt organizations. Anybody know how many different kinds of 501c organizations there are? Under the,
Listening last week.
you were listening. Last, did you tell them already, Sam?
I might have said something.
You might. There are 28 kinds of tax-exempt organizations. Now, everything you see here, by the way, is in your notebook, so you don't even have to write it down. But take a look at it. There's a C1,
corporations under Congress, federal credit unions. C2, holding companies. C3, those are all the different kinds of C3 organizations. And by the way, your organization has to fit in this category here. You have to be either religious, educational, charitable, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, foster amateur sports competition, or for prevention of cruelty to children, animals, children and animals. If you can say that your organization is going to be doing anything in there, then you qualify to apply for 501c3 status. Yes.
Can you be more than one of those?
No.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you can, but you've got to choose which one do you want to file under. Because whichever one you file under, you can do all of these, or you can be a couple of these.
I mean, we're religious, educational, and charitable, I hope.
A lot of organizations are more than one. You can be more than one in the same category. Most people are. But if you have something one and something another, you have to make a decision under which one you're filing for your tax exempt status, because that's how you have to report to the federal government.
Okay. We did that.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. What's your charity?
Okay. So there's 3. Then you have C4. Civic leagues, social welfare associations, local associations of employees. This is usually where foundations are, by the way. And you have labor, business leagues, social recreation clubs. Okay, see what I'm saying? Retirement associations, life insurance. There are many different 501c kinds of organizations. So when you say a 501c3, you are talking about the kind of organizations that fall under that particular tax code. And there are other tax exempt organizations under this tax code. Okay? Becoming clear now?
I have another question.
Yes.
Stop me if I'm monopolizing too much here.
I will.
Okay. I'm asking a question about your experience, not about the legalities of it, because we want to get money from churches for this water. In your experience, are churches willing to give to religious charities and not to charitable charities? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand
If
what
we
your
choose
question.
charitable over religious, in your experience, will churches not give to us because it's not spiritual enough?
Well, that's another question on what I'm able to answer here.
Okay.
But what I would do is I talk to your pastors here. They can give you a better understanding as to what churches. Certain denominations have certain bents. Certain churches have certain bents. The Catholic churches are probably more liberal in that sense, open in terms of, they'll support political campaigns, a lot of other things. So what a church does has to do with what a church believes in.
Okay.
Okay, and what they see their mission as.
Okay.
So that you need to do your own research, because they can.
Okay.
The question is if they will, based on who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. Okay, so I hope that right. Okay, so I'm gonna try this thing again, Sam. Right. Okay, let's look at some steps in forming your 501c3. You got to get incorporated. In other words, you got to be born. Now, this is actually not in the correct order, because before you got to be born, in this case, it's a little different than when you have a child. You have a child, and then you name the child, right? You don't have to name the child right away. Well, it doesn't work that way with an organization. You actually have to have a name first. And where do you get your name? It's up there. Which one, who can identify, which step identifies the organization as a name?
Federal identification number.
Yes.
Yeah,
interesting because there is an interesting interplay between a federal ID and state incorporation. You have to get a federal ID number, which is your own. It's like your organization's social security number. Okay? It is used that way. It should be protected. It should be protected that way. However, organizations can have the same name and be in different what? States. So that's why you have to find out if this name is registered in this state. Okay? So you need to be incorporated, and then you have to make sure that that name is not a name given in the state. And you need to get your number, which is used form SS4. It's very, very simple. Now, this issue of incorporation is simple, but you will find out as we get to the form 501c3, there are certain things that need to be in your articles of incorporation so that you will not be disqualified when you go to the next step, which is submitting and getting your tax exempt status. You also need to establish your bylaws. What are the bylaws of an organization? What do they tell you? What do they tell anybody?
Governance.
How you want to be governed. Now, all of these things are easy. However, there are things in the tax exemption that relate to all the other things. And this is why you need to consult with someone who knows where you're going. Because if you came to me and says, help me write my bylaws, and I have to know, do you want to become a tax exempt organization? He said, I'm not sure. I said, well, you know what? You need to know, because certain things need to be in your bylaws and in your incorporation in order to be qualified for tax exempt status. And you're going to see that when we start to walk through this. That's why you need to have someone who knows where you are going, what you plan to do, to even help you do a lot of this. This is why you get consultation, not because it's difficult, but you don't know going down the road that your articles of incorporation have to say certain things so you can be qualified to be tax exempt. You don't know that. Someone who's done it, who understands that, knows that, and they will make sure you put certain things in your bylaws. You write certain things in your incorporation, and you make sure that those things are according to and have specific language that the IRS is looking for, because you will have to send these documents to them. They will ask for them, and they will ask for the specific paragraph that these words are in these documents. Okay, and you're going to see that when we go. Okay, and then after you get your sales tax, your income tax, you can file for exemption from state sales tax. After.
You get income tax or your identification number?
This is your income tax exemption. Your identification number is up there. Okay, we're okay so far?
Yes.
All right, let me try this thing again. Let's look at some of the differences between starting a church and starting a nonprofit. You need to know there are some differences. There are certain things you can do when you start a nonprofit that you can't. There's certain things you can do in your church that you cannot do when you start your nonprofit. Let's look at some of them. Hiring and pay. What are one of the? Do anybody know some of the restrictions under the 501c3 status about hiring?
No discrimination.
Correct. That's right.
It's a pay rate.
Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a way around it, or there are not. You can't hire who you want, but the hiring. You remember you talking about public scrutiny? The hiring now becomes at the purview of the federal government. And there's some things, some very specific things that they're going to want to look at. Like, if you are hiring everyone in your family. Now, does anyone know now why that might be a problem under a 501c3? Why?
Because you could actually just embezzle money.
Yes, but that's a problem in any.
Right.
Why might that? And we're going to get to it specifically, but I'm just curious. Do you know why that might be a problem?
Because you're keeping all of the monies in one particular area and you're not spreading it around. You're not diversifying it. It's more centralized.
No, Sam, you can't answer this one. No, because I figure you're going to know, but nobody. You're going to have to hold on. Would anybody know? Anybody have any idea?
I think, is it possible because of the tax exempt status and hiding tax dollars?
Nope.
Will they give you a hard time for hiring only Christians?
Nope.
It can be looked at.
There's something specifically in the code that talks about it. We'll talk about it, but just curious to see. I'm doing two things. I'm raising it so you can all put that in your mind right now. Because I know some of you are saying, I'm going to hire all my family, all my I know it. Look, don't raise your hand. Everybody, no, don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand.
It can be looked at as a family business, but not for profit, since you did a 501(c)(3) for non-profit, and that you're going around the system to have a family.
It can be looked at as a family business as opposed to a public tax exempt organization. A public, not private. Public. That the federal government is going to give you an exemption for income tax for a certain reason, not for your family. It's about benefit. Who benefits? The benefit cannot simply be for an individual or an individual family. If it is, you are in violation of your tax exempt status. If it can be proven that this is simply a scam, that this is simply trying to benefit my family, this is simply trying to benefit just a few people that we're related to, you can lose your tax exempt status. And when you lose your tax exempt status, everything you got, all that money, is now taxable with penalty and interest and possibly jail sentence. Now let me just tell you, this is not, I'm not simply telling you something in speculation. I'm telling you something because I know of a situation intimately that this happened to. Intimately, not long ago, very recent, last year. Okay? And as we go on, I will give you more information about it and how I was consulting with them. I said, oh guys, this is, this is the way we do it. It's a small community. I said, I'm telling you, this is not going to fly. All you got to do is have somebody not like you.
That's right.
And just want to deal with it. Okay, so that's a very important thing. Make sure you heard what I said, because I know some of y'all was looking at that. So there's an issue with hiring and pay, issue of management. Issue of management. Who manages? It's an issue of where you get your services and who you hire, who consults with you. I know this may sound foreign, but I'm telling you, there are issues, particularly if any of the money you got is federal money. Particularly if any of the money is federal money. Then you have the IRS, then you have the federal,
Which then bundles down to the
and all that fun you thought you were going to have. Okay? Your client, who you serve, go through all these individually, But how you spend your money, even how you determine what the salaries are, can be an issue. How you spend your money. Moving from a church, which is almost carte blanche in these areas, moving into a nonprofit, you now have other issues that you must be aware of. You must be aware of. It's easy to get a not-for-profit. It's easier to get a not-for-profit. It's harder to keep it. It's harder to keep it. This is easy. This part is easy. It's keeping it and keeping out of trouble. That's harder. And if you understand what you're getting into, that's why I thank you so much, Dr. B. Sam, you need to understand what you're getting into. I'm not saying that there aren't advantages, but there are pitfalls, and you need to understand what you're getting into. It's not just fun and games. It is very serious business.
I'm just wondering.
There are fun and games too.
Excuse me. I'm just wondering if you could give a couple of examples for those last couple of categories, just as examples, or where we might find all that information.
Let's say you had a program and you only want to, let's talk about clients. You only want to serve your people in your church. Is that a problem?
Yeah.
You only want to serve your kids. Is that a problem?
Yes, sir.
Let's say you only want kids and they got to accept Christ before they come and get the service. Is that a problem?
Do they warn you before they yank your 501c3 status? If you're doing something fishy?
There's two things that will happen. First, you have to fill out a report, a 990. In the 990, they're asking for information. But more than that, let's say someone is looking at you and they don't like you. They can warn the IRS. Then the IRS can come investigate. That's usually what happens. That's usually what happens. Someone is looking at what you're doing. They know you're a 501c3. They know you can't do certain things. They contact the IRS and says, we're a little concerned about this institution here. They violated their tax income status because they're doing ABC. We think you need to investigate. Okay, so first will be your 990, which is your annual report that you've got to send into the city, to the IRS, what you did with the money, and who you paid your money to, and how much money you paid your top executives, and any relationship the consultants have with your top executives. Did you hear all the things I just said? That's all in your 990, okay, all that kind of stuff. And the second, people just don't like you.
Because we're a public charity and we deal with education. We can't have anything political in our office. Like someone asked, could we put what do you call those things? Something that, not pamphlets, but a petition sheet.
Right.
For our clients to sign. We can't have that in there.
Exactly. So we're gonna again, the whole process is to help you understand what it is. All right. So a 501c3, and these are definitions. Now we're going to get some definitions.